Hi there, it's Stuart Fensterheim, the couples expert, here with episode 94 of the Couples Expert podcast. We're coming to you straight from Scottsdale, Arizona today with a special guest today to talk about some really interesting innovations in relationship counseling. I am so thrilled that all of you are here. My mission is to bring to you, my audience, my community, and the clients in my practice, a message of love, authenticity, connectedness. What I want for all of you is to know that you can have a relationship that you've always wanted, where your partner really sees you as the best thing that ever happened to them. It is possible to be happy together and know that your partner has your back and that there's no one more important to them as you are. That's why I'm here today to bring to you this podcast. One of the things we try to do here at the Couples Expert is stay on top of all the recent innovations and therapeutic tools to help the couples that are seeking a close connected relationship. We're going to be talking about EMDR. EMDR is one of those innovations that we use in our practice to help couples really understand the importance of understanding each other's behavior and the connection, and how some of the traumas in our life that we've all come in touch with can really impact how we relate to our partners. In looking for a clinician for my practice, I wanted to add someone that really is on top of what happens out there in all the research on helping couples. And what I'm bringing to you today is one of the clinicians in my practice. She's only been with me a short while, but Jackie Ledger is one of those kinds of clinicians that really cares a great deal about everyone that comes through her door. And in doing that, she has sought out to learn EMDR. EMDR, and what that stands for, is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a type of therapeutic approach that's been proven to be especially effective in helping problems related to trauma. When someone experiences a trauma, whether the cause is a natural disaster like an earthquake or a tornado, or related to some sort of relational trauma, there are several things that happen. One of those is it lingers with us, and it impacts not only how we see ourselves, but also how we see the important people in our lives. So there's nothing more important in having a connected relationship than resolving these. Resolving these trauma-related issues can be done as an individual, but it also can be done as a couple. And here at the Couples Expert, that's what we generally do, is we work with couples to really help the two of you understand each other so much better. And with post-traumatic stress disorder, whether it is a natural disaster or shooting at a school or a car accident or an airplane crash, this process of helping you really let go of this trauma can really change the nature of your world. So I'm really looking forward to having Jackie on to be able to help us with these anxiety-provoking situations. I was going through some of the material, and I always pull up the U.S. News and Reports, and I pull up all the different things out there, and I came across a quote that I really found beneficial. The quote goes like this: "Eventually, you will come to understand that love heals everything, and love is all there is." And it's by a guy by the name of Gary Zukav. When it comes to healing, no matter what you're healing from, love is the answer. Because with love, everything is easier. You don't feel so alone. And you can trust the one you love to support you and truly be there for you and help you as you heal. Sometimes the mere presence of the person that you love is all that it takes. It helps you feeling secure and safe. And that's what we offer here at the Couples Expert, and that's why I do these podcasts. I want to give you the specific tools necessary so you can feel safe and heal from any past hurts that you may have and allow you to look ahead to the future with excitement. And that's why I've got Jackie on. We added Jackie approximately 4 or 5 months ago, and she's a licensed professional counselor who has experience working with both adolescents, individuals, groups, and families. She also works in the field of eating disorders, addiction, and more importantly for our talk today, trauma. Jackie has had advanced training in EMDR therapy and also mindfulness. And I'm going to be asking her a little bit about what the differences of those two things are. But these techniques to help trauma survivors, and more importantly here at the Couples Expert, the couples, is why I've brought her on. She has a lot of experience with addiction. And one of the things that I've known over the last few months about her is she's also very artistic. And actually, before we got on, we were doing some sound tests, and she began to sing because she also is a singer and an artist. She's one of the more empathetic people that I know, and I'm really excited and passionate about bringing her to the couples in the practice. One of the things that also just happened to Jackie, we may talk a little bit about today, is she's a newlywed. Jackie just got married this past weekend. So now it's Mrs. Jackie, I think. Right, Jack?
That's correct.
I'm happy to have you here on the podcast, Jackie, to introduce you to my audience, to my community, and talk about EMDR. So, Jackie, welcome to the Couples Expert podcast.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm so excited to be here and to chat with you today about EMDR, something that I'm very passionate about.
You know, one of the things I always ask people, we work in this sort of crazy field of couples counseling, and everyone has sort of a different path to getting here. I know my path went around lots of different things that I did, everything from an encyclopedia salesman to actually I was a manager of a McDonald's. And I was curious how you came about to work in the field of relationships.
Sure. I had always known that I wanted to do something that was people-oriented. I would say that people are my passion in life, but it took me a while to figure out exactly what that was going to be. So I started out as a nursing major, and shortly after a couple semesters of my nursing program, I realized it wasn't quite it for me, just a little bit off of what I was looking for. And I still didn't know my solution, but I did know that I'd always been good at art. So I used that strength as kind of a placeholder in my life. I decided to get a degree in graphic design while I figured out how to integrate my passion for people. And with my degree in graphic design, I got to have a really wonderful experience of working in the creative field, and it just solidified for me that I didn't belong behind a desk all day, that I really did need to pursue my passion for engaging with people and doing what I could to help. So eventually I learned more about counseling, and I had a lot of mentors who were counselors and who were able to tell me, this seems like it would be a really good fit for what you're looking for and your personality and your strengths, which was really encouraging to me. And that's what led me to enrolling in my graduate program in 2009.
I don't want to go too far away from that introduction to ask about your wedding. What was the wedding like?
The wedding was absolutely amazing, perfectly imperfect.
Perfectly imperfect?
Perfectly imperfect, yes.
I love it.
I think the most stressful thing about a wedding is that it never goes as planned, but what you realize when you're with the right person is that that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. And even in those little snags, there's so much love, and it all just works out.
So what was the one thing in the wedding that if you had to do it all over again, you'd do different?
Wow, that's a hard question to answer. I don't know if I'd do anything different except make sure I have extra of everything.
Oh, did you guys run out?
Extra. We ran out of chairs.
Oh my God.
To sit in.
You ran out of, my wife is to this day still brings up the fact that I talked her out of buying her dream chairs for our wedding. Was that kind of chair or that you ran out or?
We ran out of the pretty white chairs that we had at all the tables,
Oh my
so
God.
we
So
needed
did people have to
probably
stand or
a
what?
couple people stood until we found some extras that were stashed somewhere else, but just a little sidetracking in the middle of trying to have our party, but no big deal in the grand scheme of things.
Isn't it interesting how small things like that just really, I mean, when we start talking about triggers and we talk about relationships with that, how something like a chair could just pull people apart. And it sounds like you guys did a great job in not letting that happen.
Yes, we stayed very connected, and we helped each other through the snags on our wedding day, which I think is what made it such a beautiful experience, just solidifying that our bond is really strong.
So I hear sort of your path to becoming a counselor. Tell me a little bit about why EMDR.
I came across EMDR when I was working with eating disorders. Because eating disorders are so often a result of trauma, it became apparent to me that getting that training in the EMDR was kind of going to go hand in hand with treating eating disorders.
And what is EMDR exactly?
EMDR, as you said earlier, stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is just a type of therapy that helps to process trauma. And it's based on this theory that when we have a disturbing event from the past that stays alive in our present and causes us distress, it's because it hasn't been fully processed in our brains, and it's just kind of frozen in time. And the bilateral stimulation that happens in EMDR is what helps to process that memory so that it's no longer so emotionally charged, and we can learn from that experience and integrate it with all our other experiences of resilience and ways that we have survived, instead of it being this really emotional, very negative experience that still feels alive in our present.
So for those of my community that's listening that doesn't understand what bilateral stimulation is, what is that?
So bilateral stimulation in the context of EMDR means that we are using either taps in your ears, like
Did you say taps?
taps, like little beeps in your ears that go from one side to the other,
Okay.
or it can be using tactile stimulation or touch. So for example, I have these little buzzies that you hold in each hand, and there's just a soft vibration that goes from one hand to the other. That's the bilateral stimulation. Or you can use eye movements, which is where the name of the therapy came from, because that was the first bilateral stimulation that was researched, was the eye movements.
So the eye movement is them moving, the client moving their eyes, or do you actually touch their eyes? What exactly happens?
Good question. So it doesn't involve me touching the person at all. So for eye movements, I'm using either a light bar where the person is watching a blue light move back and forth, or I can use my fingers and the person would watch my fingers move back and forth, or sometimes people will use like a wand of some kind just to make it a little bit easier, and the person would watch the wand move back and forth from left to right.
How does that actually help a person?
What we're learning about the eye movements is that, in a way, it's like having REM sleep. I don't know if people out there are familiar with REM sleep. It's that stage in your sleep cycle where your brain is consolidating your life experiences, helping you to pair out what you need and what you don't need so that it can be stored as memories and you can recall the things that were important. So effectively, the bilateral stimulation is a lot like REM sleep, but it's that we are choosing the content that we want to reprocess without it being left up to chance like it is with REM sleep. It helps your brain to integrate and develop understanding of what has happened in the past, and helps you to process any negative beliefs that had developed about yourself in the traumatic event.
So let me give you an example. Maybe with this example, this might be helpful. One of the things I did years ago as a counselor is I was on a team, a crisis team. And I don't know if you recall the earthquake in Northridge in California. We went out there and we went out to businesses and, buildings were collapsing. And I recall the story of a woman, her child was with her at work that day. And the building collapsed, splitting the building in half. Her child was on one side and she was on the other, and she couldn't reach her child. And she was telling this horrible story about hearing her child screaming for her, and she couldn't get to her. So her trauma was she was having these dreams that she couldn't let go of about her child being injured and, her not being able to help the child. Is that the kind of trauma we're talking about? Would that be an appropriate thing for EMDR?
Yes, it would be an appropriate target for EMDR.
So how would EMDR help someone like that?
What happens when we experience a disturbing event is that sensory information, meaning what we heard, what we saw, any sensations that we felt on our skin, any sensory information from that event gets stored as part of a memory. And what can happen is if the memory has not been fully processed, then anything in the present that just even vaguely reminds us of that memory can trigger all of that same emotion that we felt when that disturbing event was actually happening. And it makes the memory feel as though it's alive still today.
So in that situation, like her child was supposed to call her to tell her that she got to a friend's house and the child forgot.
Right.
Would be probably that kind of example, right?
Correct. So that's her trigger. It triggers that memory of, oh my gosh, that time that I wasn't able to get to my child and I needed to get to her.
Right.
Sparks that same fear.
So as you're sitting there with her, how do you help her with that memory?
Well, EMDR is broken down into kind of 3 general phases. The first is preparation. So what I'm going to be doing with that person when they're in front of me is discovering whether they can regulate the emotions that they feel. So obviously they're going to be feeling some very intense emotions as a result of the trauma. What I'm looking for is, does this person have a strategy, a resource within themselves that can help them to calm down? So, for example, if they were to do a short meditation or take a deep breath, is that something that can help them to calm down? If they don't have that and they're relying solely on the environment to help calm them down, then we would need to stay in a preparation phase first, where we start building those internal resources so that they can regulate that intense emotion. Because the second part of EMDR is the reprocessing phase, where we're purposely bringing up that negative past experience and doing the bilateral stimulation on it. So it would be expected that the person would feel some intense emotion as we're reprocessing that memory.
As you're talking about it.
Correct, as you're talking about it. So if they are already prepared and they have some resources to help them with those emotions, then it's safe for us to move forward into the reprocessing phase. Then the third stage is essentially a reintegration. So after we've identified the negative belief that the person has about that past event, such as, for example, in that case, it might be, I am helpless or I am powerless.
I should have been able to get to her.
I should have been able to get to her. Right. We identify what is the positive belief that you would prefer to have, and we integrate that using the bilateral stimulation.
So would the situation that I described, would the healthier response be, I know I'm helpless because there's no way I can overcome an earthquake?
Right. So it depends on what the negative belief is. In that situation, of course, there's some natural discomfort in knowing that in that earthquake that she was out of control of elements of that situation. But if she identifies a negative belief about herself, such as, I am helpless, maybe she would prefer to think, I can help in whatever ways I have power over, or...
So would this also be true that if she didn't do something back then, like I'm thinking about that exact situation, no, she couldn't get to a child, but maybe she could have talked to her child and let her child know she's right there, everything's going to be okay, doing a lot of reassuring. And if her belief was, I'm a bad mom because I didn't do those things, and the reality is because she was scared out of her mind herself, try to reprocess it in helping her see that she was at least there for her child.
Absolutely. So there are so many different ways it can be reintegrated, and it really just depends on the particular person, their negative belief, and what they would prefer to have in its place. So instead of I'm a bad mom, the positive thought might be, or the positive belief might be, I'm actually a really good mom despite what had happened.
It doesn't change how much I love her or that she loves me.
Exactly.
You know, that's pretty cool. And is it a fast treatment or it takes a long time to reprocess all of these things? Because you were talking about 4 phases.
So there's kind of like 3 general phases. There's technically 8 phases to the EMDR treatment. However, it is a relatively quick therapy. We typically see positive results anywhere between 8 to 12 sessions. And interestingly enough, children actually typically see progress with less sessions than adults, simply because they have a fewer amount of memories that need reprocessing. And what happens in our memory network is that memories that hold similarities tend to get grouped together. So if you have
Less years.
if you have less years, then
Right.
it typically takes shorter amount of time.
I wish I was younger. Now, so you have one of the things that Jackie's going to do, just to let everyone know, is she's going to put down in my show notes the list of the 8 stages. So you don't have to be quickly jotting stuff down, especially if you're in the middle of driving your car. Please don't do that, because I don't want you to have an accident. You know, before we continue, I want to talk about next week to you guys. Next week, we're going to be doing a podcast that I've been looking forward to doing for a long, long time, which is everyone talks about counseling, and couples counseling is only for people that have all these problems. What we know is that you can also get so much benefit taking a relationship from good to great. And that's really what we're going to be talking about, how to go from having a pretty decent relationship to having a great relationship. And I'm going to give you some specific tips on what you can do about that. So I hope you're going to join me. So Jackie, you were talking about as kids, it's a little easier because they have less, baggage, I'm assuming. One of the questions as a couples counselor I have is, how does it help couples? How can this really be beneficial for a couple?
In our relationships, a lot of how we respond to one another is related to our past experience, especially with those attachment figures in our life, whether it be parents, grandparents, caregivers, because attachment is such an important part of meeting our own needs as human beings. We all have this need to feel loved, have a sense of belonging. So if at any point in our lives that sense of being responded to, of knowing that people care about me or that I'm safe and that people are checking on me, has been ruptured in any way, that can affect our current relationships. So EMDR can be really helpful in identifying where are the raw spots that I have that have to do with my relationships with other people. How does that get triggered in my current relationship with my partner? And then EMDR can help reprocess those memories so that those memories don't come alive in the context of your current relationship.
So is this suggesting, because what I'm thinking about now is some of the couples that we see where infidelity is a big issue, and people have decided that they want to work through it, but feel so stuck and locked in to the memory of the affair. Is that an appropriate referral for EMDR?
Yes, and I would say concurrently doing your couples work and rebuilding the trust as you do the EMDR around that rupture in the relationship is important.
And how does the EMDR help that? So you would reprocess it the way that you were talking earlier.
Correct. So, for example, if there was infidelity in a relationship, of course, naturally, because that was so challenging for the partner, that partner may find themselves being hypervigilant to another transgression. So they might make a mountain out of a molehill. Like, for example, maybe they see their partner texting someone and it's actually nothing for them to worry about, but because of the previous transgression, their anxiety just takes over. They start to have really negative thoughts about themselves and maybe their partner too. Like, maybe I'm not worth it. Maybe my partner is interested in someone else. Maybe he's not really there for me. Can get all that anxiety going, all that intense feeling state brought up, even though it's not actually happening now.
So the past history and the knowledge of the fact that this happened, and if it was perhaps something that was multiple times, so the belief is my partner can never be faithful to me. And if they're stuck on that thought, the reprocessing is letting go of that particular thought. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting the way that the brain can heal itself using EMDR.
Now, on top of that, to piggyback the question is, because I know you and I were talking the other day about how EMDR can be helpful in intimacy, in sexuality. It's sort of a strange concept of reprocessing. How does that work with intimacy?
I think it really goes back to developing the closeness that is required for that intimacy. So the more we happen upon those raw spots, those triggers with our partner, the more likely we are to get into a negative cycle with each other where we feel disconnected, we feel like we can't reach each other, maybe we feel misunderstood. And so EMDR can really help processing through those memories and promote that closeness that helps with sexual intimacy, physical intimacy.
So you would then use the EMDR on just one of the couple, or would you use it on both people, or how do you make that choice?
I typically go for equanimity because it's a very vulnerable thing to do, to go through your EMDR reprocessing. So I find that it helps in the bond if both people are willing to engage in the EMDR reprocessing. You might find that one person from the couple would benefit from doing the reprocessing on multiple target memories, whereas maybe the other person would not have as many target memories, and that's okay. It's more about developing that balance and having each person enter into that together.
So if one of my listeners is in couples counseling as we speak, and they are interested in having this be something that is part of their counseling, what would be the best way to them to approach their therapist with it?
I think just starting by expressing interest in the process and learning more about it. So if you're interested in doing EMDR therapy, just saying to your therapist, this is why I'm interested in it. This is what I think it sounds like it might be useful for. The therapist can then help you determine what your target memories would be and if EMDR is a good fit for the problems that you're coming to therapy for.
And one of the things I want to make sure that we mention is Jackie offers a free 30-minute telephone consultation. So if anything that you're hearing sparks an interest and says, hey, maybe this is something I'm interested in, all you have to do is go on the website, go to the link that talks about our free consults, and you could schedule a 30-minute free consultation with you, Jackie, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So we're almost ready to sort of close for today, but one of the things that I was sort of thinking about in talking about EMDR was really about, It sounds a lot like this is really something that can help all kinds of people, not just people with trauma. Is that accurate?
I would say that that's true because, of course, being a human being, we come across events that have happened that were difficult. So even if it's not an event that seems overtly traumatic, if it's something that still affects you today, then EMDR could be helpful for it.
Are there particular questions you would ask people to ask themselves to say, would this be good for me?
Yes, I would say ask yourself, are there things that I worry about a lot that aren't happening? Do I find myself thinking a lot about something that happened in the past? Do sometimes my emotions feel out of proportion to what I'm experiencing in the present? Those would be 3 good questions to ask yourself.
Those are great. And we're going to have those questions on the show notes for you. Jackie, I want to just thank you so much, both as someone that is devoting yourself to the couples in the practice and also to really giving of yourself today and your time to just really share this really essential information. Before we stop, I always ask my guests a couple of questions at the end. And the one that I like asking the most is, as you think about yourself as a couples counselor, what do you think is one thing, it doesn't have to just be one, but what is something that in the work that you've been doing that you were surprised by the most, and how has it impacted you in your own life?
I think what surprises me about couples work is just how I can so easily see both sides of the story when a couple comes to see me. I can usually put myself in each person's shoes and understand why one partner is feeling one way and why the other is feeling another way. And I think that impacts me personally because, I have snags in my own relationships just as anybody else. And so being able to view it from that lens that maybe I'm not getting the message that I am intended to get from whatever is happening in my relationship, and there's really more to it that I could investigate and understand. And by doing so, I just get to deepen my connection with that person, which I think is a really wonderful gift.
Right. And the thing for me, I think, in answering that same question would be something about a recognition that we all make interpretations.
Yes.
And why I think EMDR is so valuable to couples is we all get caught up into this way that we view our partners, particularly if we're caught up in these negative cycles, that if we can release, or as you were talking earlier, reprocess these negative perspectives about both ourselves and our partners, what does that now do to the freeness that couples have to really just see the good in each other and the love that's there?
Right. It's just a wonderful opportunity to understand each other better, deepen the connection, and really feel secure with one another, which is what all of us are after anyway.
Thank you again, Jackie, for joining us. Thank you, all of you, for coming again to this edition, episode 94 at the Couples Expert Podcast. Take care, and please stay connected. Bye-bye.